This is based upon an op-ed in the LA Times by Max Boot entitled, "How a Monstrous Putin Beat the U.S. in Syria." The entire world was surprised when, at the end of September 2015, Vladimir Putin suddenly started moving Russian aircraft, tanks, and troops into Syria. At the time, President Obama predicted the Russian intervention would fail. He stated, "An attempt by Russia and Iran to prop up Syrian President Bashar Assad and try to pacify the population is just going to get them stuck in a quagmire, and it won't work." The words of President Obama. Well, President Obama was wrong. I indicated that he was wrong at the time when he said this. The article. This week, the world is equally dumbfounded by the Russian president's announcement that he is withdrawing the main part of his forces in Syria. No one knows how big a part of the Russian military presence, consisting of some 4,000 troops and 50 combat aircraft, will return to the motherland, or what exactly prompted this latest move. Well, those of us who know and report on these matters, we know why Russia is withdrawing. It is because its mission there was accomplished. What was its mission? It was invited, first of all, by the Syrian government after more than 4 years of the United States, Britain, France, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Israel, all supporting the terrorists and the so-called rebels in their quest to overthrow the government of Syria, a legitimate government that is recognized by the United Nations. But yet, their goal was to militarily overthrow it, creating millions upon millions of refugees and causing the deaths of nearly 500,000 Syrians. Putin loves to spring surprises on the world, and that's not hard to do when you are an absolute autocrat who does not have to rally popular approval for your actions. Just as in the 1930s, it seems that today dictatorships act while democracies dither. Well, now this is where he's going off the reservation, because he's talking about dictatorships and he's talking about democracies. What is the difference really when the United States is serving as a dictator to much of the world? They can use their military force whenever and wherever and against whomever they want to use it against. That was the policy of George W. Bush when he was going into office in 2000. America should enforce its will against whomever it wants as often as it wants, and there is no reason why America cannot rule until the end of time. This was the American policy. Now, how does that differ from so-called dictatorships? In his latest interview in The Atlantic with Jeffrey Goldberg, Obama tries to wave away what Putin has done in Syria and the Ukraine with the statement, the fact that he invades Crimea or is trying to prop up Assad doesn't suddenly make him a player. You don't see him in any of these meetings out here helping to shape the agenda. For that matter, there's not a G20 meeting where the Russians set the agenda around any of the issues that are important. Again, those are the words of President Obama. Now, you can tell and you can detect that Obama clearly has been shaken by the fact that Putin has made some very important moves, and he's been very successful in making those moves. The move in Crimea, when the United States paid billions of dollars to sponsor a coup in the Ukraine, and then Russia retook the Crimea, which prior to, I believe it was 1967, belonged to Russia in the first place. But they took it back. And they did it in such a smooth way. Unlike that coup in Kiev that the United States sponsored, many deaths were caused behind that coup sponsored by the United States of America. So you have the Crimea. that Russia retained with very, very, very little violence. And you also have Syria. Syria was a war that was sponsored by the United States. You remember when George W. Bush and Cheney came into office, they had stated there were 7 nations that they were going to overthrow. Regime change, in other words. One of those nations was Syria. Another nation was Libya. Both of these started. They convened on the path of overthrowing these nations under President Barack Obama. They overthrew Libya, killed thousands of Libyans, created a failed state in Libya, all under President Barack Obama, with Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State and being the main primary cheerleader here in America for that war in Libya. So we have Syria. America sponsored that war in Syria over the last 5 years. Only at the end, did Russia come in, and that was in September 30th of 2015. Russia came in to decide to put an end to it. And in a diplomatic way, it pushed and promoted peace talks, while at the same time, it was eliminating the terrorists and the combatants who were fighting in Syria to overthrow the sitting government, the legitimate government of Syria. This is something that the United States would not do, did not do, but Putin made it happen. That was the mission. That mission was accomplished, to cut off the arms that were coming in from Turkey, to cut off the terrorists that were coming in from various European countries through Turkey to fight to overthrow the Syrian government on behalf of Western powers, on behalf of some Islamic powers such as Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and on behalf of the Zionist state of Israel. That mission was accomplished. That is why Vladimir Putin chose on March 14th to start removing some of the Russian forces from Syria. The article, it's telling that Obama thinks that the only thing that matters is the agenda at International Gabfest. That's because the president, like most European heads of state, lives in the 21st century, post-power world where international law is more meaningful than brute force. Putin, by contrast, inhabits a 19th century realpolitik world where strong men act to advance their own interests with scant regard for the feelings of other states, much less of multilateral institutions such as the G20 or the United Nations. Well, this is an opinion article. However, I must say, because millions of you sometimes read these articles, I'm going to have to challenge what he said here. Because what do you think the invasion of Libya was about? That was about brute force. What do you think these drone attacks that are being carried out around the world by the Obama administration? That is brute force. That is intimidation. We're talking about direct involvement, not to mention the indirect involvement, the proxy wars carried out by the Obama administration. So what he fails, the writer of the article fails to mention, is that Putin brought a stick and he also brought the carrot. The stick, of course, being military might, military power, and the carrot being Lavrov, the foreign minister, to negotiate, to bring people to the negotiation table. Lavrov is an extraordinary negotiator, an ambassador. He's very good, the Russian ambassador. But that's what the mission was about. It was about ending the conflict in Syria, something that the United States could not do. Remember, the United States military had been fighting, at least it says it was, fighting the terrorists in Syria for over a year. What progress did they make? None. You must question whether or not they were really fighting the terrorists or whether they were actually assisting the terrorists. And maybe every now and then go out and kill a few, put it in the media and say, oh, we just did this against terrorism. We just accomplished this goal against terrorism. When in actuality, it uses terrorism to achieve its political and geopolitical goals. The article. In the clash between these two incompatible visions of the world, there is no doubt which one is winning. From Crimea to Syria, Putin is rewriting the rules of international game in his favor. Putin is a statesman. That is how he operates. How long did Russia sit and watch the United States terrorize the world, overthrowing this government, that government, creating proxy wars? How long did Russia sit back and watch all of this? While the American officials and military would brag about their so-called superior weapons. But yet, they were blown away when they saw Russia using missiles fired from submarines more than 1,000 miles away, missiles fired from ships over 1,000 miles away, hitting targets inside of Syria. They were blown away when they saw that. When they saw Russian smart bombs and smart missiles dropping on the heads of terrorists, upon the heads of the combatants who were creating hell and havoc throughout Syria. And you've seen this week the lying reporter on CNN lying about Aleppo in Syria, the city of Aleppo, lying about Russia created all of this infrastructure damage, bombed all of these buildings. Look at what Russia did. She's lying. Most of those buildings were destroyed and the infrastructure was destroyed over the last 4 years before Russia even came into the equation. But they play most of you American people for dumb, bumbling fools and idiots. The article. In the case of Syria, Putin's objectives are twofold. First, he wants to ensure that Assad, a longtime Russian ally and buyer of Russian weapons, is not toppled. Last fall, rebel forces were advancing and threatening Assad's grip on power. Well, let's call them what they are. They are combatants, armed combatants. They are terrorists trying to overthrow the government, destroying infrastructure and destroying the people, killing the people of Syria. But no longer. The Russian intervention was ostensibly supposed to attack Islamic State. That is not true. Russia indicated that it was there to attack those who were trying to destroy the government in Syria. Who invited Russia? The government of Syria invited the Russians to that country. In fact, some 90% of Russian sorties have been directed not at its strongholds, but at more moderate rebel groups backed by the United States. Well, that's true, but once again, these were not moderate rebel groups. These were terrorists. That's what they were. These were people who were killing civilians. These were people who were trying to make the lives of the average Syrian so rough and miserable that they would reject their support for the Syrian government. They were trying to create the new reality on the ground. And the only way they could turn the people against the Syrian government would be by making the lives of the average Syrian miserable, destroying homes, properties, even lives. There was no such thing as a moderate rebel group. If they were armed, they were combatants. The U.S. military, its code involving engagement. If anyone is seen with anything that looks like a gun in Afghanistan or anywhere in the world where the United States military is operating at, then they have clearance to engage militarily, to fire upon those people. Now, these rebels in Syria, they were carrying guns, mortars, etc. They were combatants. So therefore, they were targets of Russia. The article. This had enabled Assad to regain part of Aleppo province and to consolidate his hold on an eastern corridor running from Damascus to the Mediterranean Sea. In other words, Russia had accomplished its goal, its mission. And now, because those rebels, terrorists, were no longer in control of Aleppo and some other areas of Syria, they had to go to the negotiation table. They had to call for a ceasefire and accept the ceasefire and resort to peace talks. That was Russia's mission. Mission accomplished. The article. Putin's second objective is to reassert Russia's power in the world. to make clear that Russia is not isolated after the unlawful invasion of Ukraine, and that in fact it is ready to challenge American primacy in the Middle East, a region where the United States has been the dominant power for decades. Well, Russia did not invade the Ukraine. The United States sponsored a violent coup that overthrew the elected president of the Ukraine. The article. The mission also has been accomplished. That is, the mission in what he's calling the Middle East, Russia's mission. As a bonus, Putin even got to show off the capabilities of new generation of advanced weapon systems, from fighter jets to cruise missiles that he hopes to sell to eager customers around the world. That's right, as I said earlier, Russia showed the world and showed the United States that it has some of the best weaponry in the world that can do all that American weaponry can do, and some it can do it better. You saw how quickly they got the job done in Syria. The article. Putin probably figures that it's time to ratchet down his commitment before the cost of intervention grows. Well, if you've completed your mission, why do you want to continue to run up costs? It makes sense to ratchet it down. Tellingly, his decision came shortly after a Syrian MiG-21 was shot down by a portable surface-to-air missile, reportedly a U.S. Stinger missile. Or this would have been a grim reminder to Putin of the Russian war in Afghanistan. He has no desire to risk such a costly conflict again, and no need to do so. Well, as he said, probably. He's speculating. The Stinger missile had nothing to do with Russia decreasing its forces in Syria. Nothing. Because you have to realize that those Stinger missiles are coming from the United States. And American planes are flying in that area as well. And if these terrorists will shoot down Russian planes, and they haven't shot down any Russian planes, by the way, but they will shoot down American planes also eventually. So that's just speculation on his part. And Russia has more than enough to knock out individuals who have Stinger missiles in the area. Putin can achieve his limited objectives in Syria at much lower cost. And if Assad gets into trouble again, it's easy enough for Putin to send back more Russian forces. He is not, after all, giving up the newly established Russian air base in Latakia province. It will now be Russia's second military installation abroad, alongside the long-standing Russian port facility nearby at Tartus on the Syrian coast. In other words, mission accomplished. Another Air Force base in Syria, in Latakia. You have the naval base in Tartus. Now you have an Air Force base in Latakia, which is close to the Turkey border. The article, seen through a lens of morality, what Putin has done is monstrous. Not so. What Putin has done was brilliant. And he ended it with diplomacy. He brought the people to the peace table. They're talking. They're trying to resolve without brute force, which is what the United States promotes. Brute force. So he indicates that Putin is helping to prop up a bloodthirsty regime that has been responsible for killing hundreds of thousands of people and turning millions more into refugees. That's another lie. Remember, the Bush administration, the American policy was to overthrow the Syrian government. Now, if you're not going to overthrow a government, there will be no war. There will be no refugees. There will be no deaths. The United States was sponsoring this from the very beginning and was planning this from the very beginning. But yet, these individuals, these people who are writing these stories in the press, they lie with impunity. And for LA Times, Mr. Max Boot is no exception. He's telling his lies, and I am unpacking his lies and exposing his lies. The refugees are the result of American failed foreign policy, Bush and Obama. So Putin has pulled off another coup and shown that he is more adept internationally as an international poker player than his counterpart in Washington. Well, he's not countering anything with Obama. Obama is merely carrying out America's foreign policy that was established under George W. Bush. Now, of course, Obama has put his own twists into it, because had he carried it out the way by the book, the United States would already be directly bombing the military of Syria instead of doing it through proxy. But Obama backed away from that because he knows that that was the wrong path. I mean, Israel wanted Obama to bomb Syria so badly that they helped lie about Syria using chemical weapons on its own people. Like they were all lying about Gaddafi is using aircraft to bomb his own people, peaceful protesters. Gaddafi is using African mercenaries to kill peaceful protesters. I mean, really, you people are liars. Donald Trump comes along, he's shaking all of you idiots up. Got you all rattled. Anyway, that is my analysis on this article by Mr. Max Boot for the LA Times entitled How a Monstrous Putin Beat the United States in Syria. Putin is far from monstrous, and he is beloved by an overwhelming majority of the Russian people and increasingly around the world. This is T. West with AfriSynergy.